Alrighty, and then getting into the minor setups. Alright, so we've gone over the player goal, the featured asset, and then the major mechanics. So then the very last section is going to be the minor setups. Alright, so the minor setups are just using those core mechanics to come up with at least 15 small interactions that will keep the player engaged or keep them active in the level. Right, so the key word there is the core mechanics. So this is where you can use just the grab null and jumping and moving and crouching and collecting items as your setups, right? As just the things provided to you, you're going to create interactions with those, right? So as some examples down here, there's just a large toxic spill in the player's path. You pick up objects, you pick up these pallets with the grab null and place them in the toxic spill to create a stepping stone path and then jump across the pallets to reach the other side, right? All that all you're using there is a damage volume, the grab null, and jumping, right? Everything else, all of that is provided to you. You're just going to be building with it. But these should just be small modular interactions that take place in your level, right? You'll notice that it says 15, right? And then you'll notice on the LDD, they're numbered 1 through 15. But that isn't the order that they happen in. Think of them as small modular setups that you can then place and organize in any order that you want to. All right, another example. So the player, this is one from before that we saw in the brainstorming. So the player has to interact with the solar panel and move it so it's positioning pointing towards the deadly laser. And then that powers on the door, allowing the player access to that area. All right, and a third example, we can use the grab null to slide out a broken piece of a catwalk. And then the player can jump, extend on that broken piece of catwalk and jump over a gap and reach the other side and grab a collectible. So these are just small interactions that you can fill your level with. So what we want to avoid in the level when we're actually playing the 3D game is that we're just going to hold down W and then move the mouse back and forth to just walk through the area. You want to force the player to jump, force the player to crouch, force them to use the grab null at certain points, and don't just allow them to just walk through the area to walk to the next interaction. Right? These will be really helpful to where if you have like a hallway or you have an area to where you have a really interesting setup on one side of the room and a really interesting setup on the other side of the room, but just an empty space in between. The whole goal of your minor setups is you can create all 15 of these and place any single one of them in that area, and it will fill up the progression from one side to the next. Also, something you might hear me say a few times this month is the 10-second rule, right? To where we don't ever want the player to be walking more than 10 seconds without any other input. So these minor setups of just, there's an object in the way, pick it up with the grab null and move it, right? Just giving the player something to do to force some interaction at least every 10 seconds along the way. Alrighty, and then lastly, we're just going to talk about literal key and lock setups. So we want to avoid these altogether in scraps, right? And you're probably wondering yourself, well, why not? How come I can't have keys in my level? Why can't I just include, colored keys to open certain doors, right? It's like all my life I've been putting the blue key into the blue door and the red key into the red door, but now you're telling me I can't do it in scraps. How come? Well, first of all, it's going to be difficult to find, right? So scraps is set in a modern, realistic setting. So, the assets that we're using are having, a realistic theming to them. So a key would have to be very, very small, right? Like the size they are in real life, which would make them difficult to see in the level, right? Or difficult to actually locate. To make them easy to find, you'd have to make it very large or, very cartoonish to actually catch the player's attention. So that's one reason why. The next reason why is, just like I said, it's been done so many times before. It's a worn out trope, right? It's been done so many times that it's no longer an original idea, right? It's not creative in any way. I mean, maybe the ways that you obtain the keys, that is going to be the creative part, but the fact that it's an actual key going into a door has been done so many times. So I push everybody to come up with something a bit more creative than that. Also, it's an everyday task. I can tell you when I lose my keys and I have to go find them in my house somewhere, it's not necessarily fun, right? So you have the opportunity inside of a video game to do some things that you can't do in everyday life, right? So try and push yourself to come up with something that's creative and memorable and not just another task that you'd have to do in everyday life. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well now he's telling me I can't do any literal keys and any like literal locks, so what can I do in place of it? Right? So if some things you might be thinking of right out of the box would be these right here, right? Okay, I can't do keys, so I'm going to do a key card. Right? Or I can't do keys, so I'm going to do a crowbar. Now when I collect the crowbar, every door is quote unquote unlocked because I can just walk up to it and press E and the door opens. Right? So this is the same. This is a very similar issue as the literal key unlocks, and this goes back to just selecting the first item that or selecting the first solution that you come up with. Right? So you can't do keys, so you just pick key cards, and then you stop from that point. But I encourage you to push yourself even further and try and do something that's immersive or interesting and can lead to a memorable experience or an interesting setup in the level. Right? Some examples of that would be like dynamite. All right? So the dynamite, you could have a setup in the level where the player needs to go find a stick of dynamite, a roll of duct tape, and a clock. And when they find all three of those items, they can combine it together and make a bomb. Right, and then they can go place this bomb in front of, in front of a debris pile, right, and then it can explode, right? So you hear a sound effect, you see the debris flying everywhere, there's a particle effect, there's a really awesome, event that happens, and then the dust settles and there's a pathway for the player to lead through, right? Same tech in terms of the key, right? Once the bomb was assembled, that was our key, right? And then the debris pile was our door, right? But visually and in terms of immersion, it's much better and keeps the player, interested and much better experience than just opening up a door with a key. And as a last alternative, I've seen this done a few times. I always get a kick out of it. So any type of like body part. I had a student. There was a dead scientist, and there was the only way to get into his lab was a retina scanner. So you had to go track down the dead scientist, and then take his head with the grabnol and carry it over to the retina scanner and hold it in front of the door, and then the door opened, and you could get the documents out of his lab. So same thing, right? It could have been a key, whether it's a key or a head, right? Basically, if the object is there, open the door, or if they have this item, open the door. It's the same tech, right? It's just visually it's different, and it's a little bit more interesting and creative than just find the key, open the door. So think of different things you can collect or obtain to allow access, and also try and push yourself to come up with things like I mentioned with the debris pile, other ways to enter rooms or areas than just walking through a door, right? Blowing a hole in the wall, breaking in through the ceiling, coming up through the floor, different things like that to actually enter and exit than just opening and closing doors.